All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another class. Like I said in the email, we're going to be discussing reflected light. And I know it's sort of a strange word concept. Sounds sort of like a soap opera or something, reflected light. But really what it is the idea of we have form shadows, we have highlights and all of this, but there's this other layer of what gives something dimensionality is the underside. And you can even see in the email that I sent you, I had a little drawing of, it was from my notes in school actually, of the ubiquitous sphere with the shadow and the light and everything. This concept, oh, you know what, here, I'm gonna press pause. I'm gonna mute everybody. There we go, let's mute everybody so it's easier. This idea, as you can see, here's this sort of, this is a very general, but it's a sort of a formula, if you will, where we've got like the highlight, we have what's considered strong light, a middle tone, shadow's edge, the shadow, and this right under here is considered reflected light. This is in the shadow zone in a sense. It's underneath in the cast shadow of the form, but it's actually about the same tone as the middle tone. So this is a very elusive concept. As we go through this class, as they call it, technically it's a drawing class. As you go, you know, attend an atelier or go to attend any sort of drawing class for realism, theoretically, it's actually not even about drawing or painting or anything you put on anything down. It's really, honestly, this whole class, this whole purpose that I'm really showing you guys is how to see. And so it's not even drawing. However you want to make your art, whether it's out of SpaghettiOs or chalk dust or, you know, anything that you can imagine as your material, Legos or whatever. I mean, that's up to you. It's really up, it's you seeing and understanding what we're looking at. It's not, there's some very subtle things. And once you start to be able to see this stuff, it's almost like you can't unsee it. Once you learn something and you understand a concept, you can't not know it anymore. I mean, as a child, you understood gravity inherently, you know, the idea that's like things fall when you drop. You don't unlearn that. You just sort of inherently know that and you act like that. And every, you know, action in your life, you just assume that there's gravity and because we live on Earth. So this idea of basically being able to see something, once you sort of understand it in your brain, you can't not understand it anymore. All of a sudden, it's a concept you're going to see. So this is sort of what I want to show you guys. Ideally, if we were in a traditional setting, a school setting, if you were coming to the atelier, and we're all attending the atelier right now, and you guys are coming to the Allison Atelier School, you would have your own still life setup, you'd have your own thing, you'd have your own drawing, and I would come by and I would critique each individual person as we would go through and process. So unfortunately, we don't quite have that level of interaction, but I still want to show you and teach you guys concepts in a general sense. And so as we went through this sort of scale, and if you get the email, I mean, do your best. You can definitely just try to copy it if you can, practice this. But what I'm really wanting to see and show you guys is this region under here, this concept called reflected light. And that's tough. Like without it, if it was just dark, it wouldn't look voluminous. There would be, so that's the thing, is basically what we're studying is the physics of light. And you're like, oh no, science, run. But really it's, I wanted to show you, so I picked this sort of ceramic reflective material, this ceramic bowl as well, to sort of really highlight this idea. Now, as you can see, the bowl, and I'm going to turn it so it actually gets a little more shadow. The bowl itself, you can see here's like there's a little bit of a form shadow, and then actually it's like right here is this sort of reflected light area. And I know it's a hard concept to see. What I wanted to do as an example is I'm going to put some pieces of paper underneath this still life setup, and I want you to see how it changed. Do you see how now the reflected light, because the paper is, this material is not blue, but the paper is. And so what's happening is the light, the photons basically coming from this light source are actually hitting the paper and refracting, bouncing off onto this material, and then it's bouncing and hitting your eye. And so I know you're like, science, no, math. But that's really all of this art and all of these things are really just observations of our physical world and our material world and what that means of how we understand and interpret that information. And so using that, let's see, I'm going to just kind of keep stacking. I'm going to show you guys so you can continue to see. Look how much it changed. Do you see the purple now coming through on the bowl? Do you see how much more purpley this is right here? You know what I mean? There's a lot of purple, and that's not, the bowl isn't purple, the paper's purple. And this is something you'll see when you're saying taking a photograph of a friend and they're wearing a bright colored shirt and it's outside, and they're like, if it's like a neon shirt, you'll see there's this like light underneath, it's neon underneath their chin and sometimes under their nose. The sun is literally hitting their shirt, and the light is reflecting up onto the under part of their face. And that is literally reflected light. It is light that is being reflected off an object and then being bounced off. And so it's a happening in a shadow experience. And so that's what's sort of more unique. And I know I'm going to stop lecturing and just start showing right now. But I just want you guys to sort of see, uh-oh, someone is trying to FaceTime me. I don't think I can right now. The idea of, let's see, let's put this one to green. I just want to show you one more example, just really quick, just so you can kind of see how much it changes. You see, look at how green that bowl is now, right? Just like all of a sudden it's just illuminated with a green. It's as though there's a green light underneath, right? That's really just the light hitting the paper, bouncing back up off onto this ceramic piece. You can even see it changes with my hand. It's reflecting the color of my hand onto the bowl. So all of this stuff, I know you're like, oh my gosh, like, but really this is very subtle, but very important when it comes to expressing volumetric. It just shapes and forms. Without it, it becomes very flat. So that's a hard one. I'm going to just start, I'm going to do my basic ground. I'm actually going to start erasing out this shape. And then I'm going to go in and start erasing out this. I'm just kind of, you know, this is the same process I do with all the other stuff. You see how I'm just literally, it's very abstract. I'm making just really simple shapes. I'm not overdoing it, and I'm not, it's just really simple. This is nothing too precise at this point, but even then you can kind of see it starting to become this abstract concept. And then basically I'm sort of, what I do when we go through this tonal process, what I really, when you think about it in this sort of scale of tone, right? It's like, oh man, it's really just math. I'm sort of dropping in a tonal study, like layer that's around this middle-ish tone, a little bit darker than middle tone currently. And then what I'm going to do is start erasing out for the light. And it's an opposite idea. Instead of additive, it's a reductive concept of reducing out the volume or the tone to create shape and volume. So, and this marker I used was actually pretty dark. So I'm going to just start dropping in. And as you can see already, this is the expression of reflected light. I'm already pushing this, you know, idea of it. It's not precise at the moment. I'm kind of just using the shapes. I'm using the background. Let's see. We got the dark avocado. We got some bright bananas that side. And see, even then, I'm literally drawing up with my eraser at this point. And so even as I'm drawing, I'm literally using my eraser as though I'm drawing with a pencil. Let's see, mute. Oh, there you go. And so let's see, sorry, there's another lady that just joined. So I'm actually like, even then, it's like, this isn't a mistake tool. This is a tool to use to draw with. And so I'm even just drawing literally with my eraser at the moment. I'm just kind of giving them some indications. And you can see, like, look at how abstract this is. This is very simple shapes. Now I've kind of reached a generalized tone. It's sort of an overall tone at this point. So I'm going to kind of, now that I've lifted out a lot of value, I'm going to come back in and just give it a little bit of zhuzh, a little bit of an emphasis on certain parts to kind of help to pull out those shapes. So with that, I'm going to continue kind of defining the bowl, and the bowl on this side is actually being more defined by the value around it. And again, this is this idea of using the environment around the object to describe the environment, the actual object itself. And so instead of thinking about I'm drawing a big outline, it's that I'm using the background to describe the form of this shape. I'm not fully, I mean, there's a little bit of line because it is actually a line you know, it is an angular bowl, but I'm trying to basically use, as you can see, I'm really using the environment, the back of it. And I'm kind of making it a little bit dark. This stuff is a little bit waxy. This specific chalk is a little bit darker than normal that I use. It's a little bit harder, so it's giving me a little bit more darkness. But I'm literally just like, let's see, dropping in abstractness, right? And sort of these sort of voids of absence of shapes where there's shadows happening. You can see I'm not even drawing the outline of the apples or the avocado or whatever. I'm actually just kind of indicating their shapes. So you can see I'm just giving the sort of where the corners are meeting. Everyone's sort of meeting these little spots like right here, you know what I mean, where there's dark spots that are happening in these sort of intersections of forms and values. And so that's what I'm kind of placing. I'm just sort of looking at these like really abstract shapes. I don't want to be thinking about, I'm drawing an apple, I'm drawing a banana. I'm seeing this weird triangle shape as it's sort of skewed that goes to this shape, and this triangle shape is skewed and goes to this shape. And let's see, avocado is extra dark, so I'm going to give him a little extra zhuzh. And then, you know, you just kind of start breaking up. And what you can do too when it comes to separating two forms is what they call, again, crossing the T's. As one element is coming to another, you almost kind of want to give it a little bit more extra sort of emphasis right as those intersections happen, and that gives it an even more volumetric pop, you know. Just, it's all about, see, this is all trickery. We are all just, it's all just optical illusions, honestly. This is all just pretending, right, where it's this, we're recreating three-dimensional objects in a two-dimensional space. So it's literally, it is an optical illusion. We are tricking the eye, but these are sort of well-worn theories and concepts that it's like over time have been used and developed to be able to help you to understand the world around you and being able to perceive it in a different way. So that's when I say, you're not really learning. I'm not teaching you how to draw. If you notice, I'm not saying this is how you hold, you know, I mean, I do tell you how to hold a pencil, but I'm not saying like draw, the banana has to be this shape, or, you know, apples are only come like this or whatever. It's, I'm showing you how to see so you can draw any apple, any banana, not just one apple that I come up with or whatever, you know what I mean? I think that's the key. It's just being able to see beyond the shapes, see beyond the literal, I guess, in a way. We're so literal in our minds that all we see is just literal, you know, objects, that we have to intentionally tell our brains, stop, stop being so literal. Let the eyes decide what it sees. Let the eye dictate what's happening. Now I'm going to kind of, I've sort of played around with it a little bit. Let's see, I'm going to put some value here. I'm chatting too much and not focusing. Let's see, I'm going to get my little shapes. But see, as the more I add, the more things start to come out and pop into life. I need to give this guy a little bit. Avocado is the darkest in the bowl, so he's going to sit right there. And I may actually, because he's so dark and that contrasting, I think I might change. This is where you go. You can make decisions, right? I'm going to change the value, and I'm going to change this composition a little bit to give that avocado a little bit of a center stage, give him a little bit of a pop, so he has his own experience that way. See how it just changes a little bit? I'm just kind of adjusted, if you will. And that's all right. Like, you can, as you go along and work on your piece, you don't have to lock it in and be like, oh, well, the banana says it has to be this way. It's like, no, the banana doesn't know what it's talking about. You're listening to bananas. But really, it's that you can take this as reference. This is literally reference. This is literally study. This is what studying means, is to observe and to slow down and pay attention and look. So I'm going to start taking out a little bit more light. My line was a little wobbly. Let's see. I go in squigglies, squigglies. Let's see, tonally too. I'm kind of pumping up. I gotta add a little bit more tonally for the apples. And this is this technique too, what I was talking about in last week. I'm gonna do a quick little thing example. Was these sunglass material that you can get. I'm not quite sure where you can get them on the East Coast, but they're basically, it's literally just like sunglass material acrylic, or like toned acrylic, that you can then use to view your objects by basically reducing out the light. So as I put this up, you can see it literally reduces the lighting information so you can see a more simple and more abstract approach. And so that's just something that it's like I'm going to keep reiterating that, as you know, if you have the access and the ability to, I don't know how, but being able to get one of these, you can see how that reduces the information, that takes away a lot of the lighting information and just boils it down to its simplest shapes and simplest sort of forms and values. So let's see, I need to redefine my shapes. Always the challenge too when I'm drawing here is that I'm drawing sideways. I'm not looking at the paper front on, I'm literally drawing from the side. So sometimes I apologize if they're like skewed. It's because literally it is skewed and the paper's literally falling away from me. So I've noticed that a couple of my drawings, I'll look at them front on and I'm like, I don't, but then you like skew it a little bit and it comes together. It's like, yeah, that's because I was drawing it sideways. So just a perspective, it's all good. Like there's no one's grading you. All right, so I've kind of laid out this basic structure, right? And I've kind of give it a little shadow expression, give it a little bit of a shadow expression. So I want you to see how I've given a little bit of form, shadow, but I'm hanging back and I'm giving just this a little bit of light. Do you see how this is this underside? I'm giving it just a little bit of love in a way, just kind of saying, you know what, you stay lighter, you don't have to, even though you're in the shadows. I know the tonally, it will never be considered in the strong light category or in the highlight category. It will never be super bright. It's always going to be this middle tone idea, which is roughly, let's see, like paper bag or like this, like roughly this sort of middle tone. I mean, this is a colored version, but really this tonal idea of it being this is when I say middle tone. So this middle tone is also the same tonal, like on the tone scale as reflected light. They are partners in that way. And you can actually kind of see it on my little scale here that literally there's like middle tone, and basically reflected light. They are in the same scale. When it says tonally, this middle tone is roughly like, so it's a concept that when I'm painting or drawing, you can almost plot in your middle tone and reflected light in one pass, and then just come back and drop in your shadows and sort of give it, which would be like, it'd be as though like I'm doing this as a middle tone and then coming back in and giving shadows. But it almost like, it's like you do the work, you get you get bang for your buck, you get more for the price of one, you know, by doing one swath of the same tone and then just kind of coming through halfway and doing that. I'm now dictating that this is middle tone, this is the shadow or shadow's edge shadow, and then reflected light. And so it's this idea, you can kind of take like, you know, short notes in a sense, or sort of shorten your expression of it. You don't have to be, each phase has to be intentionally plotted. Sometimes they mirror each other, so you can kind of do it all in one pass and then come back and lighten things up or come back and darken things up again. And you know, this is it's very fluid. There's no, it's not like, you know, you must do this first and then that, and that's like the severe order of operations. It's none of that. You don't have to make it so, you know, precise. Like I'm not. I mean, you kind of bounce around with it. You know, let the subject speak to you in a sense, where your eye flows. And that's the other concept of having other students. When you draw, when you paint, when you create and you observe, you're going to see things and observe things that no one else will see and observe. You're going to be drawn to lines and shadows and forms in ways that other people may not. And so that's what's awesome and beautiful about your drawing and your perception, is that everybody's different, and what you're drawn to. It's like some people may want to be really stoked about the apple, and some maybe want to like render how like all the little dots on the bananas. And so, you know, everyone has their own sort of like favorite like expression and thing. And so, but that's what makes it awesome and beautiful and unique, is how different we are and how different we see the world. But yet at the same time, there's very simple and sort of similar concepts that can be applied within. And so and sort of then once you understand and see it, you can kind of break the rules a little bit. So I'm kind of adding a little, so there's some shadow down here. Just playing with this and just giving it gentle attention. And you need, as far down the rabbit hole, you can keep going and keep adding detail and keep adding layers of awareness. But I just wanted you to be attentive to this. So I'm not going to add chalk in this bottom part because does not need it. It's not a highlight. The chalk at this point is purely for highlights or strong lights. It should not be tonally and middle tone or anything. So I'm just going to come back and I'm just going to punch up the spots where the light's kind of hitting the highest points. And you can see, I mean, I'm literally just scribbling. I'm just squiggling. I'm going to kind of give a little bit of avocado squigglies because their flesh is a little bit more bumpily. And then I'm a squint. I do a lot of this. I look a lot, which is my sort of portable version of these. So I will literally like look at it and be like, okay, and it helps me to reduce down that information. It's sort of my portable way of, you know, being able to reduce so that my eyes aren't overwhelmed by all the details and dots and fun things. And I can just see where are the points, the highest highlights. And that helps me to kind of look and see, okay, relationships, right? It's all relative. Everybody's relating to each other in that way. One thing connects to another, which connects to another. And so it's looking at these interactions in a sense with volume and form. We do not live in a vacuum. We exist around things. The things around us affect what's around us and affect, like I'm saying, this reflected light. The light underneath is going to affect the object that you're looking at. This type of idea, it's very subtle though. It's very challenging to perceive. You know, this is not an easy concept. What we're learning is very difficult. You know, honestly, you know, this is this school, the Atelier. It's the owner of the school is named David Hardy, and he comes from the school of Vermeer. So this training, this tonal training, and really we further go down the list of this tonal list, actually then goes into color temperature, and we go in and do color temperature. And so then it's warm and cool. There's warm and cool flip-flopping and all of this that's then happening. And that's when you add color, basically. And so you can take this tonal idea and then you add color to it. So this is what the old masters would do. They would do this tonal study when they're you know, burnt umber, burnt sienna on a rabbit skin glue or just like a gessoed canvas, and they would sketch out their sketch with it. They make their middle tone all wet, and with a rag and whatever, they would lift out to make the light, just like I had done and shown you guys with my eraser. And then they would come back in with their burnt umber or whatever and draw in the darker parts. And basically they were making a tonal sketch. That tonal sketch then becomes the foundation for the painting. And after this tonal sketch is dried, which literally within an hour it's dried, so they have a very short window to pretty much capture everything. Then you go back and you glaze and you layer the colors on top. And that's why it gets, there's the old masters of oil painting, there's a luminous, iridescent, almost like depth quality to it, a subsurface scattering that happens. And it's because they are layering and glazing thin layers of pigment with oils and all these other things to basically like build up the tone, the color on top of this tonal study. So this is just an example. I just want you guys to sort of understand the history in a sense, and that you guys are sort of the next phase or the next students in the atelier of this idea and these studies of light and form and shadow that have been passed down for hundreds of years. I mean, this is, you know, Vermeer, you know, it's the great Dutch painters, you know, they're Rembrandt, they all were studying light and really how light came through a window, how light behaved, you know, and that's, without light, we can't see, right? So it really, and especially in, you know, in the light up in Northern Europe is just stunning, you know, it's got such a cool light. I think what's neat too is that every place on the earth has a different light, like the sunlight's different wherever you were at. And so that changes how you perceive your objects, how you paint your objects. And so this is this thing of basically it's showing you that light and highlights and forms, sometimes it's not just about the shadows. You know, when you say shading and okay, we've drawn the lines, now it's time to shade. It's not so much shading either. It's actually, it's like value. And that's this tough concept, right? Of coming, it takes a lot of practice. And I want you guys to understand too, that the fact that I can draw and paint like this in 10 minutes or whatever, while I'm talking and making no sense, this is thousands of hours of practice. This is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of papers that I've thrown away that have just been stacked up. This is practice and practice and practice. but really of seeing. It's not even of drawing so much as observing. It's that I've spent a lot of time looking and seeing the tiny, subtle, minutiae things. And so it's paying attention to those tiny details, but also the overall picture. And so the more you can get this overall shape, the more you can describe the form. And so that's why I picked this one particularly, so you can get this reflected light idea, because we want to be able to see the volume of this. If I took out that volume, if I took that out and basically, like, if I just covered it up, it almost flattens it out right away. This adds a sense of depth to it. It's telling you that there's more. There is a plane here, but it turns. And so that's really how we're communicating and how we're describing. We're turning edges. We're showing form as it's evolving and flowing. And so that is not easy. These are very complex concepts. This is stuff that is, eluded a lot of people. And I think that, we need to let go of the idea of like, oh, if I can't do it right the first time, like, just drop the charcoal, it's done, forget it. No, it's okay. Everyone can draw. Everyone can create. It's about practicing. It's about studying. It doesn't even matter about what you put on a paper, really. What your brain sees and understands is the most important part. So how you see these apples as they relate to the other apples and as they relate to the bananas, or, you know what I mean? I just want to see them like, what does it actually look like? It's not that bad. I'm going to put the paper up close too. I want you guys to see, again, example of how sketchy and loose this drawing is. Do you see? This is literally, if I were to like zoom in super close and like, you know what I mean? Your brain would not know that this was an apple and a bowl of fruit or whatever, but as we pull back further, it starts to get that sense of volume, right? And just because it's using abstract shapes over, as you build those abstract forms, it actually starts to develop into a shape. And so that's the thing, is we're learning about, instead of just drawing outlines and saying, I'm drawing an apple. Wow. How boring in a sense, like, that's great and that's an apple, but is it this apple? No. So it's learning to be able to really slow down and see the actual form that we're looking at. What are we actually seeing? And sometimes, and that's what I was saying before, it's using the value and the forms around this shape to dictate your shape. This is not an easy concept. These are definitely difficult ideas. This takes a lot of practice. This is something too that you want to, I'd love for you to, set up your own apple study, but I also want you to look at, and I'm just going to have it right here, or else I'll just play around and show you. Look at how quickly, see, as we've had this study, look at how the reflected light changes as I put this paper up. Do you see? Look at how blue it is all of a sudden now. That is significant, right? That's telling you how much light is actually being reflected down on the ground or on the bottom, and then bounce back up onto the surface of that object. And so that is this really, at the end of the day, all of this realism and drawing and everything, it all just comes down to your observation of light and how light is interacting with the forms around it, that you're studying. Really, it's just an observation in that. And let's see, I'm trying to think, maybe, what we'll do is we're going to drop it in space. We're going to give it a horizon line. Oops. Maybe a sideways horizon line. Sometimes that helps too. Just drops it into space. Suddenly it's on a table. You know what I mean? Suddenly you can start building, and from that, and you can start creating newer, environments. That composition can change. Suddenly I can maybe push it so that now it stops here. That's where it breaks up. You can kind of change and play around with your cropping. Sometimes that actually, the composition works a little bit better on that. What it's about, you experiment, you push it and say, you know what, I think I've decided I'm just going to say this. And ta-da! And I'm going to sign it too. Remember to put the date, which, what, 6? Yeah. Because when you go back, look at what you did, see the date, sometimes it's really cool to like line them up and see it in chronological order, to see your awareness and how much you've observed and understood. It takes time to develop these skills and develop the ability to actually to see, right? To really understand what's happening in our world. And it's like this, I could keep on going. Like you can just keep on refining and keep on going and just doing passes of, you know what I mean? Just tightening up those shadows, tightening up those highlights. It's really, you know, it's how much time you have, how much effort you have in that sense, and wanting to be willing to sort of put in that drawing stuff. We've got a couple more minutes. I want to, let's see. Are you guys done with the fruit? Does everyone have a drawing of the fruit so far? Are we good? Because I'm going to change the fruit. I'm going to take it off now. We're going to move on to I'm going to do a quick sketch of the tea kettle. And that's another one that's fun and difficult. Let's see. Come on, guys. Very heavy. And tea kettle time, covered in charcoal. All right. So with this guy too, same thing. We have the experience of reflected light, but it's a little bit more subtle because it's not so rounded. I will show you, let's see what happens when I put this under here. Do you see how much reflected light comes through? Let's see, let's have them sit on that. You see how much the reflection of the light is actually hitting onto this form. And so you can see it almost kind of stops roughly right as the turning of this form. It's a very oblong, there's sort of rounded shape. You can see it stops right around here-ish. It's like as the edge of the paper, but also it's just, it's bouncing and creating that redness. And so I'm going to take this out and we're going to sketch this one up real quick. Let's do a quick little study of the tea kettle again, with the idea of paying attention to this reflected light idea, right? It's not just a shadow here and it just goes dark all the way to the bottom of the surface. There is this transition. It actually gets lighter right before it hits the bottom. So again, I want to sort of pay attention to that and let you notice, let's see what that means. This is a different charcoal, it's a little bit lighter middle tone. Okay, now we got our middle. All right, let's dive in. I'm going to start erasing again and start creating my shapes. So and it's really, again, if someone were to walk in right now and see this drawing, they'd be like, what? Like, what are you doing? What is that? That's not a tea kettle. Like, and it shouldn't be. That's the point. It shouldn't be. When you start drawing it, you shouldn't just go, wow, wow. You know what I mean? Like, which is fine if it is a tea kettle, but you know what I mean? Like, it's great, but it doesn't have an outline. This does not, there's no black outlines on this. It's not a cartoon. It's not an illustration, right? This is a rendering, which is a little bit different in that sense. So I'm going to keep going. Let's see, where is my tone? And, you know, I'm going to do a light outline. As I'm saying, don't do outlines. I'm like, I'm going to do one. Me very light though. It's literally, it's actually for me to keep me in place. So I will use outlines, but it's almost as like just notes. I'm just giving myself indications so that I don't lose track. Keep my proportions in check. You know what I mean? It's sort of just, it's like little just guidelines, literally it's guiding me to where I need to go. And so I'm just giving myself indications first that I can then play up and do it later. But I'm just going to kind of like, these are just notes that I'm dropping in, and then I'm going to come back and give myself a little bit more information. Let's do this. And it's challenging too, is this is metallic. It's, you know, it's shiny. It has a lot of reflected surfaces. This is not an easy thing to draw. This is definitely challenging. All of these things are. It's not, you know, it's not, we have to challenge ourselves sometimes to push and see things, you know, in a different way. It's not easy. Our brains want to stick to what's comfortable and what it's known. And so a lot of times it's difficult to sort of see outside of our normal perception of reality, which is really what I'm asking you guys to do. I'm really saying, can you see the world in a different way? Can you look at these shapes? Can you look at this world and these objects in a way that maybe you've never really done before, in a way that no one's really asked of you to do, right? That idea though, this is something that'll help to sort of, once you start drawing and start seeing the world this way, you kind of can't not, like, it all of a sudden, becomes a thing. Like as working in the film industry and video game industry, I can no longer see movies the same way anymore. The suspension of disbelief falls away really quickly for me because I know how things are made and I understand. And so sometimes it's like you can't not know it. Sometimes I wish I could not know it and just enjoy the movie, but you know what I mean? Your brain already is like, well, I know how that was made. It's like, well, I'd like to just had sat there and had fun, but okay. So I'm just kind of like making, again, I'm doing notes again. I'm kind of little heavy-handed notes. Now I'm going to start dropping in my shadows. Again, I'm probably quite sort of skewed just because I'm sitting at it staring at it skewed. So we're also doing ellipses, which is also a challenge. And cast shadows. But you see how it's like slowly becoming a tea kettle, right? Like it's just like, but I'm using really simple shapes. I'm not going in heavy-handed either. I'm kind of creeping up on it in a sense. It's a gentle sort of exploration of this form and finding it, just kind of going, okay, here's this, here's that. Let's see, a little squiggly here. Let's see a little bit of the shadow off there, the tea kettle. There's also the idea of sort of lost and found edges, sometimes where the form, the object itself, and the background are the same tone, and they actually would be kind of, it's like they disappear, the borders between the two evaporate in a sense, and then come back. And so this flip-flop, this play of experience of the background and the foreground and who's dominant, who's back, and it's a unique dance that one you can kind of pay attention to and you can manipulate. And that's what I show you too, is that it's ways of manipulating the eye to get the eye to look in a direction. Basically, it's a trickery. It's what film does. It's what movies or all kinds of just media in a sense do. Commercials. There's a lot of parts in movies and things that you wouldn't realize are really broken, but because your eyes focus on the action, you actually don't notice it. Like, you know, like stormtroopers in Star Wars bumping their heads on the ceilings and stuff. You don't notice it because the action is happening in another part of the screen, but it's there if you're looked for it. And so it's learning how to sort of be like, look over here instead of over here. Like it's a distraction method in a sense is really what we're doing. We're kind of, you know, distracting the mind, the eye in a way to say, I decide that it's going to be like this. And this is, again, when we say drawing, art in general, it is communication. This is theoretically, it's words in a sense put into shapes. So I am telling you, and with my forms, what I'm seeing. I'm describing to you without my words by drawing on this paper that anyone could walk up and look and go, oh, it's tea kettle. You know what I mean? And that's a very clear form of communication. And so really what you guys are learning and what I'm teaching you is the alphabet. I'm teaching you how to construct words and sentences and in paragraphs in this art language. It's about being able to say, what do I see? How am I seeing it? And so then once you start to learn your language, right? You know, children, it takes them many years to learn how to speak and master their thoughts. And to communicate, I would like a glass of milk or things like that. It takes time to just communicate simple things, right? So complex ideas and thoughts and theories and sort of the ethereal and the higher level art, that's taking that to that next level, right? It's now using our language to tell a story and to say something, a message is being delivered. And even these are messages I'm describing to you, and I'm telling you the story of this tea kettle and what it's experiencing in its little world. You know, and this is something that we've done as humans, you know, since we could hold charcoal. And this is literally about as archaic and as, you know, going back of cave painting, you know. I mean, theoretically, I'm sure they had a lot more art back in the day. It's just the cave paintings were the only ones that survived over time. But proof of the fact is that humans have been wanting to and creating art representing their world and what they're seeing since we could, you know. And I think that there's something very human about trying to capture what we see in that expression and that sharing it with someone else, you know, and saying, look what I saw, isn't it cool? And that it's sort of that it's a story I'm telling, you know what I mean? When you make a piece of art, you get to decide to just tell a person this story, say, hey, this is what I saw. This is really interesting. I liked how much the shadow followed this shape, or you know what I mean? It's fun to be able to like you can show your joy and your love for these objects by how much attention you give it. Just like with a pet or a plant or a family member or any, you know what I mean? Anything that you give attention to is love. And so really at the end of the day, as a sort of ethereal and sort of woo-woo, it's, you really are giving it's loving the object that you're observing. It's this, you don't, if you don't like something, you don't spend time with it. you don't look at it and spend time with it. You have to really like something to be able to put this much effort into it. And so it comes through, right? When you care for something and you give something love and kindness and warmth, it flourishes, right? And it will then become brighter and happier. And so the same can be expressed in a drawing too, just as much. I'm going to go back, and now I've got my chalk. I'm going to do chalk pass real quick. Highlights, highlights, highlights. A little bit of reflected light, just a splash. This. Let's see. So it's tough, it was metallic, so it is very shiny. So there you go. You can see, I mean, very simple shapes. Again, I'm just loose. I'm going to pull it up close so you guys can see. It's getting heavy. We're running out of paper. So you see how, look at this drawing. Do you see how loose and like whatever man it is? It's, but yet at the same time, it's a tea kettle. You know what I mean? Your brain's like, oh yeah, tea kettle. And as it's like close up, if you really look, it literally just smudges and squishes and, and just scribbling. But as you pull it back and get it, viewed from far away, it makes a little bit more sense. And so it's using this tonal idea. Of course, I squished it. Where I'm seeing it too, it's funny, is that actually I realized the difference is that when you look at it from this way, it's different. I'm actually sitting lower than the camera. So my perception of it is actually, I'm viewing the pot from a below image. And so that's why it looks, I'm literally looking up at this. But that's the thing, is perception, right? How we perceive, just me sitting here and drawing is different than this camera viewing this object. And so when you do your still life setup, which I recommend and everybody can do and try to do, create a view spot. Put a little piece of tape on the floor that no matter what, whenever you're doing your drawing and you're observing your drawing, stand at that view spot when you look at it. Because literally, if you take just one step to the left or one step to the right, everything changes. And then you're gonna be like, how come my drawing is just so weird? It doesn't fit and it's not working out. It's not looking the way it should. You have that is the constant. As long as you view your object from the same place, it'll be the same. So even like if I were to be going through class or whatnot, if someone was taller than me or shorter than me, I would literally have to get a stool to stand up to look at how they're seeing their object and their piece. And then if it was someone short, I'd literally have to squat down and look and see how are they seeing it so that I could then give them a feedback. And so thinking about that idea of consistency, and doing a still life. If you want something that's going to be more permanent, like I'm doing these and it's like we're doing them in minutes, you can do a still life setup, and if you can, leave it on a shelf, and like it could be there for months. Like you could work on that thing as long as you need to, want to, however, whatever. Keeping it just as long as, obviously, like just keep your view spot wherever you decide it to be. That's what we would put, a little piece of tape. You'd walk into the atelier and there would just be tape pieces all over the floor. It was a mess, actually. It was total madness, but it was kind of cool too, because it was just like you could see how many artists had been there and are currently there and using different spots. And so you just see people standing in one area and then someone else is standing in another area. You just like everyone's just kind of standing and looking. And it's important though, and I think I just want you guys to see, even just here is that examples that as I'm viewing it, it's different than the actual camera view. And so perception is everything. Shadows are everything. And this reflected light, do you see how this reflected light, and this is sort of our theme today, the reflected light idea. I want you guys to try to see it, look at it in things that you may not have noticed before. If it is, literally bring it, put an apple up to a window and look at it in the window, and see what's happening. See, even just my hand, putting my hand up, do you see how it suddenly changed? And now there's actually the reflected light where there was none before. There's, because it's floating in a sense in space. The moment you put a piece, a base down that it's sitting on, suddenly the light reflects off of it and creates that reflection. And so this is the idea. When it's floating, there's no base. There's like the light literally just falls off. when you put a base down, suddenly there's a place for the light to bounce off of. And so it's science, right? Like it's math, which is like, oh no, but it's the truth. This is really what art is. It's math, it's science, it's observation of our natural world and our how our brains and our eyes perceive information and light and value. And so it's not magic. I'm not a witch, or you know what I mean? Like this is practice, this is training, this is just study, and just, getting really messy. Like my hands are like filthy. I think it's exactly, yay, right? It's like, you should get messy. It shouldn't be precious. It shouldn't be uptight. I think people have this misconception that when it comes to realism, it has to be, yay, it's all right, you can get dirty. This concept that it's like, it has to be perfect and has to be detailed and has to be just right. If you don't get it right the first time, it's like, forget it. That's furthest from the truth. I feel like, the sort of cliche art teacher that's really mean and is aggressive, especially sort of art colleges. And to be honest, the owner was not nice at times. He was pretty rough, but he was an much older generation. He's like 90 something now. But there'd be times where he would come up and draw my drawings and give me feedback, and he'd be like, my dear, were you dropped as a child? Obviously the shadow was here and not there. Well, he was right. His delivery kind of was lacking, and I think that there's something about supporting people and saying, you know what, we don't need to tear each other down in order to lift each other up. And so I think that, practicing, studying, believing that anybody can do it. It's not just, the elite or the that have the great talent. You don't have to have talent. It's about skill. You're developing a skill. Just like soccer, just like playing the flute, just like speaking a foreign language is a skill that needs to be practiced and honed and regularly maintained. Because as I say that, because I fell out of practice after I had my son, and thankfully you guys in this class have helped to bring me back into shape. So regular practice pays off. So that's for this today. If you guys have a chance, just look at and pay attention to this idea of the reflected light. Yay, look at that. Oh, that's beautiful. See, exactly. And immediately your brain goes, oh, look, see, fruit. Yes. And like, oh, and look, it's a tea kettle. And yeah, here, I'm going to undo. Let's see if anyone wants to show. Feel free. If not, no worries. I'm unmuting everyone. You can mute yourself again if you like. Feel free to share. Yay, those are beautiful. Yay. Oh my gosh, look at the tea kettle. Yes, it's awesome. Oh, those are so wonderful. Those are so wonderful. That's great. And that's what it's about. Oh yes, look at those. Is that a fruit?
Oh, well, that one again.
Oh, so cool. It's great. Well, you guys, I really appreciate you attending and helping, keeping me focused in the sense. And I don't know, it's nice to be able to connect with others and share this knowledge, you know what I mean, that it's sort of kicking around in my brain, and I feel like it's lack of sharing. So in a sense, you guys are now part of an atelier, and you are now in the next line of artists that have come from an atelier that basically is the School of Vermeer and the School of Light Training. So you guys are part of that schooling, which is kind of cool. I think there is an artistic lineage, right? Like that's kind of a neat idea to be in an artistic lineage. And so you guys are part of this idea, this lineage of light study, which is pretty intense. Like this is not little kid stuff. So for children or anyone to be approaching it from any age group, you have to be practiced. So I greatly appreciate you guys. Hopefully it makes sense. I know it's just some pretty abstract ideas that I'm throwing at you guys. So it's a little bit harder too when it's like digital. If we're in person, I can like critique you and actually you're drawing in person. It's a little bit easier for you to see and understand. So it is a little bit more of a challenge, but hopefully, you guys understand and see a little bit of what I'm talking about. I know it takes practice, but definitely if you have a chance, copy from the email, the sphere. Do it in charcoal if you can, and just really, even the more you do it, the better you get at it in a sense, especially in paying attention to the background, how I was talking about this lost and found edge, where it's sort of an edge there, and then right here, you can see it actually kind of evaporates, the separation of plane evaporates. And so there's that idea of these sort of forms and using background to describe the object that you're studying. Complex, very abstract ideas, but hopefully it makes sense, and hopefully you guys can grab a teapot or whatever, and also start practicing and studying and seeing things just in a simpler way. You know, I think that's the thing. That's the key that I hopefully you guys I can show you is that you can just take off that detail. You know what I mean? Like here, I'll stripping away that detail and really taking out that information really gives you so much more. You know what I mean? You start out with that and you start rendering just in that. I need to pull out, I have another drawing that actually was a study that a training for this of the 4 phases basically of that. And I'm going to bring it up again next week to show you guys the sort of passes of awareness of value. And so it is weird. This is a tough concept. So I appreciate you guys' patience and bearing with me on this one. It's fun, but it's also difficult. So